This is the Cubs-related podcast presented by CubsInsider.com. My name is Corey. I am joined, as always, by Brendan, and we are coming to you on a Thursday evening. You guys probably listening to this on Friday morning after the Cubs take the middle two games of a four-game set with the Philadelphia Phillies, two first-place teams at Wrigley Field, and they both get themselves a split. I think it's a little easy to have hoped for more given the way these games played out, but Brendan, I think all told, a playoff-like feel at Wrigley for 4 days here. And, you know, again, when you're playing a first-place team, I'm not super mad about splitting.
I mean, just getting right into it, with Jake Arrieta coming back, that was like a goosebump moment, man. And when the Cubs gave him that standing ovation, it reminded me of kind of like why we fell in love with Jake Arrieta. And so when Arrieta took his moment to recognize the fans, like that's who he was. He took his moment. He recognized the big situations. And yeah, like seeing Arrieta back on that mound at Wrigley was so bizarre in a different uniform, you know, throwing those 93-mile-per-hour sinkers. And it hit me right in the feels, man. It really did. I didn't realize how much, you know, you miss someone like an Arrieta when he's gone. Yeah,
no, that was you know, and we're already getting back to Monday here, but I was a little emotional there. There was definitely, someone in my house was definitely cutting some onions throughout that game. I'm sure that's what it was. But we will talk about these four games. I'll run through just a quick recap of how it all went down so we can kind of set the stage. And then we will talk about it all. We will talk about the Darvish versus Jake Arrieta Monday night primetime showdown that we had. And we will talk about the Javy Báez walk-off. He adds another chapter to the wonderful story of El Mago that keeps growing and growing. Anthony Rizzo's dropping bombs. He's breaking signs, you know, getting up in that Schwarber territory of home runs like that. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about Schwarber himself, who continues to do some really good things. Maybe take a look at the bullpen and everything else going on in between with the Cubs. Just a quick recap here of these games. The Phillies taking game one 5-4. It's a very frustrating game. The Darvish, I think, was the better pitcher in this game compared to Jake Arrieta. Both pitchers go 6 innings. Yu gives up 3 earned, 3 walks, 7 strikeouts to Arrieta's 6 innings, 1 earned, 2 walks, 4 strikeouts. Soft contact against Yu, and just, you know, kind of some badly timed balls really does him in. And then ultimately the Cubs bullpen cannot hold this one down. The Phillies tying this one in the top of the 9th, and then JT Realmuto winning this one in the 10th with a home run on Tuesday. Cubs winning 3-2, and this was the Javy Báez walk-off game. We'll talk more about the specific circumstances of that, I think, you know, once we finish with this. But again, the Cubs winning this one 3-2. They score 2 runs in the bottom of the 9th inning to win this one and walk off the Philadelphia Phillies. Jose Quintana started this one for the Cubs. He goes 6, gives up no earned runs, 3 walks, 4 strikeouts, and 2 hits allowed. He was very good in this game again. On Wednesday, the Cubs winning this one again, and all it took, guys, was 3 bombs, and that is how the Cubs get 8 runs. That's always a fun recipe. Brendan, they get out-hit by 5 by the Phillies, but they outscore them by 4. And
good formula.
Sometimes that's Cubs baseball right there. That's Cubs baseball sans Chili Davis.
Right, that's recovering from Chili Davis.
Yes, 100%. So the 3 bombs in this game accounting for 8 runs. And Anthony Rizzo, 3-run home run that tied the game. The Cubs were trailing 3-0 in the bottom of the 3rd. That tied things up. Albert Almora Jr., who we will also be talking about once we finish up here with the recap, hits the first grand slam of his career. And it broke a 3-3 tie. Not a better time for that. And I don't recall if Albert has had a curtain call at Wrigley Field before. I'm not thinking of a time. He certainly had walk-off hits before, but you don't get a curtain call for that. So I don't know if this was his first time, but it always cool when guys, Javy gets them every 5 minutes, right? And it's always cool. But it's cool when some of these other guys have those moments. His first grand slam, a really nice curtain call. And so that was a really cool moment for Al. And then in the bottom of the 7th, it was the aforementioned El Mago, Javy Báez, his 12th on the year. And that gets you 8 runs, folks. So that was the story on Wednesday. Cole Hamels, not great in this game. 4 innings, 3 earned, 2 walks, and 6 strikeouts. 9 hits allowed. A lot of seeing eye contact in this one, Brendan. Just one of those games where the Phillies were putting the ball on the ground and the Cubs just were not in the position to field them. So sometimes that'll happen. But who was really good in this game is Tyler freaking Chatwood. He comes in, and I think this is the 3rd time he's done something like this, at least off the top of my head. I know he did it in that game in Arizona where he, kind of played a big role in lengthening that game. He had an at-bat in that game, and also that 15-inning game that Wilson hits the walk-off. This is another one. Tyler comes in after Cole Hamels, throws 4 innings, 3 hits, 1 earned, 1 walk, 3 strikeouts. So a big outing for Tyler to kind of rescue Cole Hamels and keep the Cubs from having to dip further into that bullpen. And he shut the Phillies down. So, allowed the Cubs to break out the bats and do their thing. On Thursday, this was a weird one because it kind of just looked like one you could throw in the trash and move on. The Phillies led 7-0 at one point in this game. It was another clunker for my boy, Jon Lester. 4 innings, 7 runs, only 4 of them earned, though. The defense behind him didn't particularly make a bad outing any better. Just 1 walk and 5 strikeouts, but he gives up 2 home runs, one of which by JT Realmuto that unfortunately might still be flying through the Chicago night. That was an absolute bomb, as much as it pains me to say. And that's, just sort of the story with Jon Lester. But the Cubs trailed 7-0. They cut the lead multiple times. They trailed 7-2, then 7-3. Kyle Schwarber, with his 7th home run of the season in the 7th inning, brought it to a 3-run game at 8-5. Anthony Rizzo followed later with his 13th of the year, now number 1 on the team, for those of you counting. That made it a 2-run game. The Phillies would add 1 in the top of the 8th, and then in the bottom of the 9th, the Cubs would threaten getting a run on, this is a real thing that happened, a Tyler Chatwood pinch hit double that drove in Rizzo. That made it 9-7.
He's got a good swing, though. I mean,
he's
that's
got a good swing. Like I
hack.
said, yeah, we saw him get, take a good swing on the ball in that game in Arizona.
Yeah.
And, the Cubs were just in a place where they had used their entire bench and they needed someone to come up there. And, I mean, he smoked it over McCutcheon's head. And I think everybody, it was kind of like, wasn't McCutcheon the one that caught that Pedro Strop ball?
It was, and he
That's weird. I didn't even think about that.
And he stands still, and he's like, what did I just see?
It was a similar reaction, except McCutcheon didn't catch this one. Like, right away, everybody's like, whoa, like, this is, he just hit a rope. Like, everybody was playing way too in for this. But that was followed by a horrific at-bat from Addison Russell and a Victor Caratini flyout that would ultimately strand the tying runs. So that is how that one kind of petered out in the end. So it went from a 7-0 blowout to all of a sudden a very competitive game where we're all kind of complaining about the umpires by the end of the game somehow. But that's the story in that one. Nola with the win. He is now 5-0, and Jon Lester with his 3rd loss of the season. So that kind of gets us through just a quick lay of things there. But Brendan, there's a lot to break down in this series. The first thing I want to talk about, and I think usually this is a fair way to proceed in terms of appeasing everyone. Let's just talk about Javy Báez.
Sure.
I think that's the easiest way to go about things. And just another fun chapter to add to the legend of El Mago. We knew that he was dealing with that sore heel after making a really nice play in that finale with the Nationals on Sunday Night Baseball, and the Cubs just being conservative with it. They had scheduled him for an MRI, I believe, on Tuesday afternoon, or maybe it was on Wednesday afternoon, whenever it was. But he, going into that game on Tuesday, we weren't sure that he was available. It certainly seemed like he was not going to be available, as there were times earlier in the game where you're thinking, okay, if he's available to pinch hit, let's try it now. It's a low-scoring game. Let's get him in here and see if he can get the big hit to kind of reverse the fortunes in this game. But this was such a Javy moment in the sense that the Cubs are, I believe, 0 for 10 with runners in scoring position to that point, right? And at the time, Brendan, I was watching the national broadcast. This game was on ESPN. I normally do the overlay with 670 The Score, but I changed rooms, and because it's available on the TV, I just threw it up on ESPN, didn't want to worry about it. And it was such an amazing moment because I think Descalso was the one that was due up. And the announcers are talking about Descalso and getting ready for this at bat. And all of a sudden, you just hear this roar start to come over the crowd. And immediately I'm thinking, okay, I know what this is. And out comes Javy Báez, the knight in shining armor to try to save the day. And first pitch, he lines one right down the right field line, wins the game, brings in the winning run. And because he wasn't really going to run full out because of the sore heel, he has this moment where, like, as soon as he does it, he just kind of stands there and is like, yeah, okay, done. Like Joe is like, Javy, we need you to go out there, have a good at bat, win this game. And it's like nothing for him. He's like, yeah, okay, done. Okay, we can go home now. Yeah. This was just so Javy, man. Like they were struggling with runners in scoring position all game. And it's sort of like a budding trend with them as a team that gets a lot of guys on base, often deals with, always getting hits with runners in scoring position isn't easy. And they just call upon Javy and he's like, yeah, no problem. I got it.
Yeah. I mean, imagine being a fly on the wall for this conversation. So after the game, Báez was talking about like what he told Pedro Strop and John Lester. So imagine that trio in the dugout or in the clubhouse. Imagine that. So this is what Báez said. Quote, I told Pedro Strop I was going to end the game. He did not believe me. Lester said, you're not supposed to be out there. And I said, look, we're going to play a long game, and it was tight. And so basically, Báez told Pedro Strop and John Lester, game's over. Give me the bat. I'm going out there. I'm ending this.
Yeah, and I love this. I'm looking at the NBC Sports article. I love this. I love this quote from Strop where he says, quote, he started putting his shoes on, and I'm like, Javy, you're not playing today. And all of a sudden I hear on the TV, and they're like, Joe Maddon's going to his bench. Javy Báez is pinch hitting. And just the notion of Strop being like, you're not even playing today. Javy's like, I got it. Like, don't worry. But I have to guess, Brendan, that this walk-off probably moves Albert Almora Jr. a few notches in your book, because Albert Almora immediately, if you go back and look at the tape, is looking at everybody else making the beeline for Javy, going, don't pick him up, don't punch him, he's got a sore foot.
See, that's the awareness we're talking about here. That's what I'm talking about. Trust me. I recognize that right away. And you don't want him to put any weight on that heel. But I just want to go back to Pedro Strop. Apparently, he was like sprinting around the clubhouse when Javy hit that walk-off. So now not only are you concerned about, Javy's heel, but Strop's hamstring out there sprinting around. That's the last thing you want. So, fair to say the Cubs avoided, two different possible disasters.
Only you look at those things like that.
I mean, hold on. You gotta admit, you weren't at least looking at the heel when the Cubs were, they demolished their guys whenever they hit a walk-off.
No.
So, yeah.
No, I was thinking the first thing that came to mind was, of course, Javy walks it off on the first pitch.
Look, I'm not
on one freaking foot. And I love the idea of Strop running around. Nobody thinks about these things like you, Brendan.
Well, when
I think you gotta
Yoenis breaks his ankle on a ranch, man, this is the crazy stuff that happens, Look, we've been conditioned. Sammy Sosa hurt his back sneezing. Yeah. Brandon Mara hurt his back or whatever, putting his pants on. I think
he was putting his pants on, yeah.
Yeah, these weird things happen.
Well, who among us, right?
I'm sorry, but I'm not psychotic. Of course I recognize that moment, but it is in the back of my head where like, please don't hurt yourself celebrating this. And that Kendry Morales, broken leg on that walkout grand slam 10 years ago. So yeah, these things in the back of my mind.
I understand why you are the way that you are, but it doesn't make it any more fun to,
But you act like I don't
while
appreciate
everybody
it.
else is celebrating a walk.
No, I'm celebrating it too. Like I'm not. You're making me like sound like I'm psychotic over here. That's not how it is. It's in the back of my mind. Let's put it that way. It's an afterthought. It's not my primary thought.
Whatever you have to tell yourself, buddy. But this was an amazing moment, and again, like there's such a cool thing that has developed, and I know that a lot of you guys end up at Wrigley Field and are certainly watching the games, and this is just something that I certainly have noticed in going to as many games as I've been fortunate enough to attend, especially since 2015. But the way that the crowd has developed this love with Javy Báez, and we're Cubs fans, we love our guys, right? Like we're gonna support everybody and get loud in those big moments. But the roar that comes over this crowd, and just that palpable sense that everybody knows Javy's gonna be the one to do it. The Javy chants, like as soon as he steps in the batter's box, has just been so amazing to watch, as you just sort of watch these guys elevate into star status and things like that. And you get a big buzz when Rizzo comes up in big moments. Chris Bryant got a huge ovation when he pinch hit on Thursday in a spot to kind of get the Cubs back in a game that they were trailing by a lot. But right now, man, and correct me if I'm wrong, everybody, but there is nothing like the energy that pulses through Wrigley Field when Javy has the chance to come through in a big moment. There's just nothing like it. It's electric when Javy Báez has an opportunity to be the hero at Wrigley Field, because everybody just at this point expects him to do it, and they believe in him so much. And and we've talked about this before too, there's the absolute joy that man plays baseball with, and wearing that all on his sleeve, I think really adds to that. But just another amazing moment. He doesn't even need 2 feet, guys, and he'll take care of it. It's too easy for him right now. It's really special to watch. But Brendan, I do want to go back to Monday's game and talk a little bit about the Jake Arrieta Darvish Bowl. I didn't come up with a more creative name for that, but we'll go with that. And I did just want to circle back to, I'm very glad that we got that moment with Jake, and he's been back here before. They played video packages before, but this is something that, you don't always know when these moments are going to come, that you're going to be able to get them. And to have the moment where, Victor, who was catching that night, stands up, is not going to, get this play going. You stepping back off the mound and the crowd giving Jake the standing ovation. It was just something that needed to happen. It was so deserved for Jake. And I think, almost like a moment of closure for everybody. He's not been a Cub for, a full year now. But this is that moment that you just need, where we can all publicly say, thank you, Jake. Like, we recognize the accomplishments that you brought to this city and what you meant to this city. And yeah, like I said, I mean, I feel like that old Mike Myers SNL skit. I was getting a little verklempt watching this. I'm like, man, rarely do I get emotional watching these games.
You do appreciate it more because, like you said, you don't know when or if you get a moment to do that. And I think I'm reminded of our teams that we watched growing up, and, Derek Lee, Aramis Ramirez, and those guys. And I sadly can't remember a same reaction for Aramis Ramirez. I know they gave him, something behind home plate when he came back to Wrigley. I think when he was with Milwaukee after he played for the Cubs. But that's what I'm saying. It's Arrieta's an all-time great Cub. Maybe not statistically or whatever, but he provided some of the most memorable times, I think, in our fandom. So to get that appreciation was huge. And it also reminded me of 2014 when he was in Boston and he almost threw that no-hitter. Mm-hmm. And this is why. So when Arrieta's walking off the mound in Boston and the Boston crowd is giving him that ovation, Arrieta, he recognizes these moments like to savor them. And Arrieta takes his hat off, he tips his cap, but he takes an extra second in 2014 to recognize the magnitude of that moment. And he did the same thing at Wrigley. Like, yeah, he stepped out. And that he wanted to look around at every single perspective of Wrigley Field to embrace that. And that was special. It really was. And I think by the time Arrieta's career is over, he's going to be remembered, I think, as a Cub. I know he has a lot more time to go, but.
Oh, you don't think he'll be remembered as an Oriole?
I mean, maybe some people in Baltimore will remember that.
Yeah, I think I certainly don't remember specifically. I'm sure those guys, had like decent little ovations when they first came back.
Yeah, they had their ovations, but I remember very vividly. I'm like, this is what they're doing for Aramis, like before the game starts when half of Wrigley Field is not even there yet. Like, are you serious? Come on. That's
kind of what I meant is you just never know the circumstances that these returns or reunions, whatever it is, are going to come under. And so I think that we were able to just get, I think what was a mostly full house at Wrigley. I think it was pretty cold on Monday, so maybe not completely, but a mostly full house at Wrigley, standing ovation. They just get that moment, and I'm glad that we have that, and everybody was able to savor it and that we got that. So, but I do also want to at the same time give, a lot of credit to Yu Darvish. I thought he pitched a really good game on Monday, and it was so close, man, to having that big time Wrigley Field start, that, we were all kind of waiting for.
Yeah.
And, I think the game kind of gets away from him, not necessarily, because he was pitching really poorly or anything. He
got kind of screwed with some of those BS hits. That's the issue.
Yeah, it just was kind of one of those things. Even that triple that puts the Phillies up 3-1 by Cesar Hernandez, is in that weird spot in the right field wall where it's pretty dangerous for Jason Hayward if he's going to try to make like a diving play on that. It's kind of where the two walls converge as a bit of a corner. You're dealing with a lot there, and then it bounces over his head. Just, kind of a fluky little thing. And, that's kind of where the lead goes away. But I really thought that Yu was the better pitcher of the two. The Cubs offense letting Jake off the hook early in the game when they had some opportunities to really cash in, with runners on and bigger situations. But I thought Yu was good in this game. And, all told, like, he does deliver by the book a quality start. And I think for him to do that on a night where so much of the focus was on Jake Arrieta, and Yu was even self-aware of that going into the start, calling Jake a Cubs legend, right, and noting the accomplishments that he had made. Like, he knew that this was going to be a high-profile game, and one where he was, fair or otherwise, going to be directly compared to the other pitcher, not just because he was his opposition for the evening, but because they were sort of going toe-to-toe in free agency together. So I thought this was a really good start for Yu, and it was disappointing that it didn't result in a win, because I think the body of work for Darvish in this game deserved one.
He handled the moment exceptionally well, but it's the same issue that I've had the past couple of weeks, and I'm not going to kind of relish in a start like this until Darvish shows some of that fastball command. Because if you're throwing 55, 60 sliders a game when you're only throwing 100 or 90 total pitches, that is going to be problematic, possibly. And I said before, but if this is what it is, and so be it. But you kind of expect a little bit more. And it is kind of, and not to say that you're wrong here, Corey, or whatever, but it is kind of like a silver lining start again. And I'm kind of sick of doing this. He pitched well, don't get me wrong. 6 innings, he did very well. Quality start. He handled the moment exceptionally well. but the stuff that has hurt him recently with his fastball command was still problematic. So he threw only 18 four-seam fastballs, and half of those were thrown way outside, basically that would have hit the right-handed batter's head if he was batting. So he's still not showing that fastball command that I want to see. Until he does that, any type of these, 6-inning starts are sort of silver lining starts, and I want to see more of that. So I have the same issues I had a few weeks ago with Darvish. I think it's great that he's finding a way to handle and get around his inability to locate the fastball and be successful despite that. But I still have issues that that's not going to be a long-term solution. And I still worry about, once the scouting report does turn and people realize, this guy's throwing 60% sliders per game, how the league will adjust to that. So again, it's just a matter of him getting his fastball command back. He didn't have it again. At the same time, give him credit for adjusting around the fact that he did not have it, and he gave the team a quality start. So there's good, there's bad, but I'm still in the same place I was even 2 weeks ago with Darvish.
Yeah, and not to be forgotten that this Phillies lineup is good. This Phillies lineup has some very good hitters in it, and unfortunately Andrew McCutchen picked this series to kind of get his season in gear, full gear here. So especially with him, it lengthens that a bit. But yeah, I think it's, the thing with Darvish is always going to be that you're kind of always going to think that there's just more to be had there. But
it's not like I want more out of it. Like I want normal Darvish. Like normal Darvish doesn't throw.
Well, normal Darvish is more than I think what we're seeing.
Yeah, but I'm not saying, I want a complete game shutout.
Yeah.
I just want,
sure.
Like, here's the thing. If he had that 6-inning quality start and threw good fastballs with good command, I would be more encouraged despite the same stat line. But that's what I'm trying to say is like, I don't expect, more from Darvish because, he has it in him. I expect just him to be normal, to have fastball command. That's what I'm trying to get at here.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that, we talked about earlier in the year where when he was struggling, like, okay, right now, he kind of slots in as the fifth starter. Like, we can kind of let him figure things out and maybe not panic as much. But now you're kind of getting to the point where, okay, we're seeing Lester kind of have these starts that he's had.
Choose your words carefully there.
Right. Well, but it's just to say that, we noted this even at the time, even I did. Like, we can't count on John Lester to deliver a 1.1 ERA for the entire season. Mm-hmm. And when he starts to have starts like this, we've seen Cole Hamels have pretty high pitch counts recently in some of his starts. Like, you need everybody to kind of step up at different times. So I think that's where this, the digging into Darvish and trying to figure out how he can get back to that normalcy and better command of his fastball is always going to be important, because you don't want to just slot him in and say, he's, he can be the fifth starter and we'll see what we get. You're going to need him to be at the top at certain points of this season when the other guys aren't able to consistently, just deliver great start after great start. Everybody's got to contribute, and everybody has to be able to step up at different times. But I want to talk about Albert Almora Jr., Brendan. And I want to read this stat, and this was going into the game on Thursday, and he doesn't have a good game on Thursday. So certainly this is going to skew some of these stats as he had an 0 for 4 day on Thursday. But the point is still, rather good, I believe. And this is from Mark Gonzalez of the Chicago Tribune. And he says, Almora batting .337, 28 for 83, again, prior to Thursday, with 7 doubles, 5 homers, 14 RBIs in his last 24 games. The 5 homers match his total from last season in 152 games in 2018. Mm-hmm. His grand slam was the 3rd for the Cubs of 2019, all in this month at Wrigley Field. And that is the first time the Cubs have had 3 grand slams in a month at Wrigley Field since June of 1987, a year that Brendan and I both remember very, very well.
Very fondly, yes.
No, neither of us remember that because neither of us were alive.
Nope.
But again, 0 for 4 day on Thursday. He grounded into a double play at a pretty inopportune time in this game as well. But those are really good numbers. And for someone who, has always, we know about the defense. He makes good plays in center. I think the Cubs defense is better served when he is in center, allowing Hayward to play in right, where he is one of the best in the game. And, these numbers are really good. And he's starting to show a little more power, which I think is something that you were kind of thinking was possible going into this year. Mm-hmm. But we've sort of belabored the point about how good Wilson Contreras, Javy Báez, Kris Bryant, and Anthony Rizzo have been. And the key to this team going to another level in terms of their offensive production and really just on the whole is some of these other guys being able to supplement that and make that lineup all the longer, right? And when you look at what Almora's been able to do in the time that he's been given, and again, I love him in the sort of mid to late portion of this lineup. I think this is the right spot.
You always
got
to throw that in there, don't you?
I'm just saying he's hitting
fair.
a lot better since they moved him from the leadoff spot, I think. So yeah. I agreed with it, and I think I'm very happy with the results. Yeah. But also what we've been seeing out of Schwarbs at the leadoff spot, if you can kind of have that as a 1 to 6, if Hayward is hitting 6th and, Almora 7th, whatever it is, you've got a very long lineup that will be reminiscent of other lineups we've seen this Cubs team put out there, where it is a slog to get through if you are a pitcher, because you are not safe when you get through, Javy or Kris and Rizzo in the first inning, going 2-3. Like, you've got another, big group of hitters coming up that you have to maintain composure. And one thing that we've always seen with this team is that they are very good at adjusting. And, as you keep going through this order, they're going to give you trouble. And if you're able to lengthen that space where these guys are hitting really well, it's a lethal lineup, even more so than we've already seen, Brendan.
Yeah. And with Almora, like the reason I thought he had more power in him was nothing to do with numbers. Like, he just has that pretty swing. I don't know what it is, but he just has that it factor.
You just like his hair.
Well, I do love his hair. I mean, by the way, the headband and the hair, like perfect baseball fashion. Huge supporter of that. But going back to even his days in spring training, like every single spring training I go to, he's always putting on a show in BP. I swear to God, he's one of the guys who's throwing up bombs left and right. And you look around and you're talking to different Cubs fans, like, why is Al not hitting more homers in the actual games? And I don't know the reason for that, but I just always knew he's got a pretty swing. He does seem to have more raw power than he gets credit for, and maybe we'll have to see more, but maybe he is tapping into some of that raw power potential that he does have. Now, Evan Altman wrote a terrific post about this a few days ago on CubsInsider.com, showing maybe one reason why he is more successful recently, and he's not striding as high and as more pronounced as he was even a few weeks ago, and how he's been striding his entire career. He has a very big leg stride for a timing mechanism, and he's not doing that as much anymore. And maybe that's allowing him to recognize pitches more. Maybe that's allowing him to get in a set position a little bit sooner so he can see the pitches better. Whatever it is, it's working. And I think it goes back to the point too that you and I always harp on is, there's so many different numbers out there, and you can always talk about, small sample size and whatever. And if you don't watch these games, you're going to miss out on some really important things and some observations. And I think what we're seeing with Al is, he made this change with his stride, and now he's hitting the ball further, and he's pulling the ball more with authority, and he's hitting the ball higher. He's hitting the ball higher and further. That's what you want to see from Al. And I don't know what to expect going forward. I'm not saying, this is the new Almora or whatever, but it is fun to see him do so well, because he has all the talent in the world, and to see it actually translate onto the field is fun to watch, and especially because Hayward has not been good recently, and Al has been a terrific defender the past year and a half. So if you can combine any type of offensive value, that's going to be a bonus to his already superb defense. And we see him continue to make play after play out there in center field. So it's fun to watch. I'm with you, Corey. I'd rather see him do it kind of lower in the order, but there is going to come a point where if he's doing this well consistently, I don't have an issue throwing him back out there just for a few games, depending upon the matchup, even at leadoff. But as it goes right now, I think Schwarber is like stapling down that role, at least for the short term.
Yeah, absolutely. And, coming into the game on Thursday, Almora was at a 97 WRC plus. So just, very shy of league average. It dips down to 91 again after the 0 for 4 on Thursday. But I think the key is that he's finding himself, very nearly putting up kind of those league average numbers. And, if he's able to do that along with his defense, keep, seeing a little more of this power show off, he's, a very valuable piece to this team and a very key complementary piece, again, to those, kind of main four guys here that are going to continue driving this offense. And
how confident are you that this is going to continue?
I don't know, honestly. At this point,
the pause says it all.
Just with some of these guys, I don't like trying to figure out what I think is going on. I've made the mistake of either buying into Hayward's resurgence or his slumps equally too many times, that for some of the, I will absolutely scream to the heavens that I think Chris Bryant is going to be an MVP player, right? Like we did all this time. But with some of these guys, I'm kind of content to just dig into what they're doing at the moment, talk about what we like, what we don't like, and just see if they can keep it going. I don't feel like offering a definitive stance on that. But I do think that, one thing that is just interesting is, it's what is today, May 23rd as we record this. So Al's got a good bit of time here to eclipse his career high in home runs, which is 8 from the 2017 season. So much like we're keeping an eye on Rizzo for that key number of 32 that he's always sat at. It'd be cool if Al could get to double digits, double his total from 2018. Again, free of Chili Davis's, the chains that were put around this offense.
Literally the chains.
That's, just an interesting number to keep in mind and see if he's able to eclipse it. But again, as I was talking about, kind of going into it, I think that Schwarber's really found a spot for himself in that leadoff spot. And I think you and I were both big fans of the experiment before it started, right? Like in 2017, I think you'd have to be a little crazy at this point to, say that worked out really well. I don't know how you can even argue that.
I knew that was going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, right. I think that the thought process was right, and it is now. And I'm looking at, this is from earlier this afternoon on Thursday, and Tony Andracki from NBC Chicago pointing out in the 8 games that he has been at the leadoff spot for the Cubs, Schwarber slashing a .267 batting average, .368 on base, .567 slugging, good for a .935 OPS. He scored 8 runs and has 4 extra base hits with 6 RBIs. So that's really good. And we highlighted that at bat, the 13 pitch at bat that ends in the opposite field home run for him in the Washington series, because it was a good example of the eye that he's able to have and the ability to run up pitch counts, keep at-bats going, keep fighting and grinding out those at-bats. And I think you're really seeing the results pay off. And in a lot of these games, especially when he's able to hit with the authority that he has recently, you love him hitting in front of Chris and Javy and Anthony, because, just in so many of, especially early in this year, and I think even, all of this time sans Dexter Fowler, right? We've gone through these bouts where it just has not been a productive spot for the Cubs lineup at all times. And to see Kyle up there doing this and, know that you have that confidence when the lineup turns over, you're not just waiting to get to Chris in the 2-hole and then, the middle of that order, you've got Kyle Kyle there to kind of start things off. And you kind of just go through this murderer's row of sorts where it's just like, okay, like if they can navigate through Kyle, Bryant, Rizzo, and Javy without some damage, like good on them, right? You tip your cap to the pitcher, but that's a really tough stretch, especially followed by Wilson on the days that he's back there catching. Like that is a really, really tough lineup. So I have been very pleased with this experiment with Kyle up top, and I think if he's able to keep this going, again, like I'm not sure if this is their long-term plan or exactly what they have in mind here for this, but it's certainly worked so far to some really good numbers.
Yeah, and he's doing it too against left-handed pitching. I mean, he faced a tough lefty, and he was right up there in the leadoff spot. Yeah. So that says something to that Joe trusts Schwarber in that situation. And Schwarber's one of those guys where you don't understand why his numbers are not better. I mean, looking at it right now, he makes currently above league average contact. In the month of May, he's walked once every fifth plate appearance, a 20% rate. That's insanely high. And he has potential to hit 40 homers, 40 plus homers. How has he not been better? And I think no matter what his age is, no matter what stage in his career he's at, I'm gonna believe he can be one of the best hitters in the league. That's just how I operate, given what you see. And recently too, he looks better. Like even he looks pretty good in late April, but he looks even better now than he did a few weeks ago. He's continuing to adapt. You start the game with Schwarber, he gives you a long at bat, then you go with KB, you go with Rizzo, you go with Javy, you go with Wilson. That sucks for pitchers. That really, really sucks. So if Schwarber can continue just to do what he's doing now and take his pitches, he doesn't even need to be that 280, 40 homer guy that is his ceiling. Even if he is a guy who bats around 240 with mild, moderate power and a good walk rate, that's very valuable for that leadoff position. And we know he has more in him to go above that stat line. So I like it, Corey. I like it way more than I do with Almora, because unlike Almora, Schwarber does take his pitches, and Almora has that Starlin Castro syndrome in him where he's going to expand his zone because he's so good at making contact. He's going to make bad contact on pitches outside the zone. Schwarber is not going to do that. He's going to stay on those pitches. He's going to wait for his pitch to hit, and he's going to take those strikes, even though you and I will be like, why is he not swinging at that? So I like it. I hope it continues, because I personally, this is what I want. I want Schwarber as their leadoff guy, but I know there's going to be a time where he's going to go through a slump, and it's going to make you question once again if he's right for that role. But if he continues to do this is my long-term solution.
Last 25 games for Schwarber. This coming from Christopher Kamka. We've mentioned him a lot at C Kamka on Twitter. Last 25 games, 269 batting average, a 912 OPS with 4 home runs and 11 RBIs. Yeah. I'll tell you something, guys. That'll play. Yeah. That'll play indeed. So I want to cover two things before you get to the series preview here, Brendan. And one can be pretty quick. The other is Tyler Chatwood. So we'll talk about Chatwood in a second here. Yeah. I just want to remark quickly on how awesome it was when Rizzo took the D out of that Budweiser sign. That's pretty much it. But in a 3-0 game, this was a bomb. And there is something, I think, when I'm an old wise man and I'm looking back on this period of Cubs baseball, there may be few things that I reminisce on or just like images that stick with me than those Rizzo home runs at Wrigley Field. Just those tanks and that beautiful swing, and the way that he leans back when he knows he got one and just watches that ball go. It's just so beautiful and so like quintessential, like this Cubs team and this Cubs baseball. And this was just one of those. They're down 3-0. They get 2 guys on, and Rizzo just hits an absolute bomb. But the only thing I have to ask, Brendan, about this, how is there not a promotion that if somebody hits that freaking sign, everybody in the ballpark, gets a free beer or something like that. Like, there's got to be like a bullseye on that thing now. I mean, he took one of the letters out.
I think the only reason they don't do that is because they know they have the potential to hit that sign.
Right, yeah. They're like, we've seen what Rizzo and Schwarber can do, guys. We're going to lose a lot of beer if we do that.
Yeah, but I'm with you. And my thing with Rizzo, too, I remember this so vividly. When he was just acquired by the Cubs, he was playing in the World Baseball Classic for Team Italy, and he was playing in Arizona. And I went to the game early just to go see what this guy looked like. And he was hitting tanks left and right. I'm sitting around fans, some of which were Cub fans, and just so excited about the potential of the team. And during that time, the Cubs were going through their worst of the worst in their rebuild phase. So it's always fun to see these guys just translate and go from somewhat unknown to kind of defining your fandom of an era. It's insane. And I'll remember really just Rizzo's trademark swing. I always compare him to Chase Utley because he has that short stroke. But that's it. And I can recall so many times, even being at games, whether it's away games or games at Wrigley, when he squares up, right away it's gone. Yes. There's few guys in the league that have that ability. When Rizzo squares up, the moment you see that ball leave his bat, it's going 450 feet. Yeah. And yeah, man, it's almost going undernoticed, right? Like Rizzo has been on a tear the last 4 weeks, and we've come to expect it. And that was a point that you and I brought up with Javy and him being quote unquote not hot by John Lester. Yeah. It's when you start to suck and go through a slump that you start to notice things. Rizzo's out of that early season funk. He's hammering the baseball left and right. And we're just sitting here yep, that's Tony for you. And that's the trait of a generationally great player, I think, is when you expect something that is among the best in the league. And when it doesn't happen, you're genuinely surprised that it's not happening.
Yeah. So, a similar thing, another one from Chris Komka. Last 27 games, Anthony Rizzo has a 343 batting average and an 1164. 1164.
That's insane.
OPS with 10 home runs, 27 RBIs. He has 27 RBIs over his last 27 games. Again, I'm really putting myself on a limb by saying this with these last two things, but that'll play. I really think that'll play in this league. And an 1164 OPS.
Yeah, I think that will do it.
That dog will hunt, man. I think you can get away with that in this league. But just real quickly before we preview this upcoming weekend series here, Tyler Chatwood, man, you got to give him props for some of these outings, and again, coming in today and roping a big hit that almost really nearly pushed the Cubs to an epic comeback. That would have been one of the key moments in that game. But his ability to come in some of these games and give you length and really good stuff has been really impressive. And
sure.
And I think, for as much as we've talked about some of these guys, or even the last few years here and just sort of their different situations and what they're battling, you got to give Tyler a lot of credit, man. He was awful in 2018 and he was dumped on by fans, the media, everybody. And it was to a degree, as long as it's within reason. It was, sort of deservedly so, right? He was terrible.
No, yeah.
But for him to be able to stick with it, he doesn't pout, he stuck with it. He did the work. He put in the effort to try to figure out how to get better and how to rein in those control issues at least a little bit. And he's been a very productive piece for this team. And again, we mentioned a few of those games. He's played a big role in a few really nice wins for this Cubs team. And I guess I wanted to say that, and I wanted to just give him a lot of props for the role that he's played and the job that he's done so far in 2019. But we keep kind of thinking about this out loud. Like, what role do you see him playing going forward? Because, we're seeing him in some of these games. He's coming out, he's pumping like 98 miles an hour. He's got a ton of run and movement on some of these pitches. He's mixing in some of these breaking, these off-speed pitches. Like, he's got nasty stuff, which is why they brought him on in the first place. But, you have to wonder, like, is their plan to keep two long men in the bullpen in the long run? Like, when we see Strop come back, which is supposed to be soon, I believe he says he's ready. I think we're getting ready for a rehab start pretty quickly here. So that's very good news, obviously. Brandon Morrow is trying the throwing program again. I'm not gonna, hold my breath on that, but we'll see. And even if you made some moves, right? Like, do you see them keeping two stretched out guys in this pen for situations like this? We've seen them, do a Darvish, Mike Montgomery piggyback. We saw Cole Hamels, Tyler Chatwood piggyback. Do you see them doing that? Do you see them trying to maybe shorten him up and get, squeeze the absolute most out of that velo and out of that stuff for shorter spurts? Like, what role do you see him playing if he is able to keep going forward and, not be, not have command issues that are totally derailing these appearances?
I like the role he's in right now. I know Mike Montgomery is the lefty version of him, but there is value, I think, in having two long relief guys because you do have an aging rotation, one, and with Darvish still trying to figure things out, it is valuable to have two guys that you can rely on pending the matchups too. But there were, like Chatwood's performance was gutsy, and I think it kind of changed my mind a little bit. I was concerned there the past few weeks because he was showing a lot of the same command issues that he had last season. And there was, before that last game of the Philly series, his walk rate was almost 7 batters per 9 innings again. So having that 4 innings really deflated that walk rate again because against Washington, he walked 2 guys in 2 innings. Against Cincinnati, he walked 2 guys in 2 innings again. Previous outing in Milwaukee, 3 walks in 4 innings. So he was still showing a trend to walk guys. And against Philly, he had clearly better command. So for Chatwood, it's been a hit or miss this year. He's had outings where the command has been looking really sharp. And then at times where, surprisingly, the command is just not there anymore. So I don't really want to see him go into a different role until he hammers down this consistency. Because if he does have this ability to not walk guys, having a guy go 3 to 4 innings is valuable. And we saw the value of that when he did so against Philly there. So I like what it is. I know there were some hints that maybe making him to a high leverage reliever, maybe that 7th or 8th guy, because guys like Brad Brock have not been looking good. Kinsler has been struggling recently, and you're looking for solutions. And I understand that. And I think about that too. But I just don't know if Chatwood is your solution given the uncertainty still with that command.
Yeah, that works for me. I do want to just quickly point out, because we were talking about the Rizzo home run. The Cubs just posted on Twitter that Budweiser sent Anthony Rizzo an invoice for parts and labor, and the description of the repair is repairs of damage caused to Cubs and Budweiser property. They sent it to Anthony Rizzo at 1060 West Addison for $10,473, but they are the ones paying that invoice, and they are donating it to the Anthony Rizzo Family Foundation.
At that.
What a wonderful little story that is. So I just wanted to share that. That's very nice.
Yeah, so let me go ahead and preview this upcoming series against the Cincinnati Reds once again. So this time, the Reds will travel to Wrigley Field, and they will play a 3-game set starting Friday at 1:20 p.m. Central Time. You'll have Del Scalfani for the Reds take the mound, who's 2-2 with a 4.6 ERA. Hendricks for the Cubs will take the mound with a 4-4 record and a 3.21 ERA. And then on Saturday, the Cubs will be back at it again at 1:20 p.m. Central Time. They'll have Tyler Mahle on the mound for the Reds, who is 1-5 with a 3.51 ERA. Do not be fooled by that record. Mahle is disgusting. Hard-throwing lefty, young lefties, has phenomenal stuff. I think on the Reds, in addition to Castillo, he might be the second nastiest pitcher. You can debate that, but he's very good. Yu Darvish will face Mahle. He's 2-3 with a 5.06 ERA. Thankfully, Corey, the Cubs do not play Sunday Night Baseball. So they will play instead at 1:20 p.m. No more ESPN. We'll get Len and JD for that game, thankfully. Tanner Roark will take the mound, 3-3, a 3.51 record. Jose Quintana will take the mound for the Cubs, who's 4-3 with a 3.3 record. Right now, the Cubs are 29-19. The Reds are 22-27. The standings are as follow. The Cubs are a game and a half up on Milwaukee, who's 29-22. Pittsburgh is 3.5 games back at 25-22, and the Cardinals, I hate to see it, Corey, but they are going down to 500 almost, or 25-24, 4.5 games back. Just to give the complete picture, in the National League, the Cubs still have the second best record behind the Los Angeles Dodgers, who are 32-18. But we'll see how that plays out. I think I'm not really looking for any one particular player this upcoming series. I'm just looking at how really Madden utilizes that bullpen given the issues, how Carl Edwards Jr. will be utilized with some of his mishaps recently, Brad Brock, Brandon Kinsler, and maybe, maybe we'll see Tyler Chatwood in that high leverage role. You never know. Anything you're looking for?
Oh yeah, I mean, we're out for retribution, man. The Reds ruined ruined our series streak, man. We got to get them back for that. I think this is one where you demand they break out the brooms. We got to pay them back for that. We had a wonderful little streak. There. Yeah, we had a wonderful little streak going, and the stupid Cincinnati Reds get all in our business at their home ballpark. Like it's something. But no, I mean just keep it going. I mean, I think it's a tough series to split with Philly. I think you're left feeling like you could have won at least 3 in that one, which is always something that you want to do when you're playing another first place team. When you feel like you could have won the series, I think those are big moments for the group and stuff that you can really build on. But I think the Cubs are playing really well for the most part. I wish that they would in general clean up some of the sloppiness that we've seen on defense. It's nothing that is driving me out of my mind necessarily, but it's just uncharacteristic for this group.
It's kind of driving me out of my mind.
So does everything.
Well, I mean, because some of those plays,
it's just like uncharacteristic for this group. I think, for the most part, like one thing that we've, I think, been able to expect from them to a degree is just that they're going to play really clean, good defense, make smart plays, and for whatever reason, Hayward got picked off today, like just some weird
David
sloppiness from them.
Making plays he should be making.
That I think
Yeah.
You just want to see cleaned up in general. You want the bullpen to tighten up a little bit, but in general, like, this team is playing very well. Their record shows that where we're getting really good performances out of a lot of these guys on offense. So yeah, I mean, just take it back to the Reds. They ended a very nice streak that we had, and we got to pay them back for it. So I think, as usual, that is all we have for you. We will come back to you after the Cubs finish up their series with the Reds. As always, we thank you guys for joining us and listening to us and participating with us. You can find us on iTunes, the Apple Podcast app, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, etc. And if you would like to see us in a different app, just let us know and we will do our best. But again, thank you guys for listening, and as always, go Cubs.